The sun was beginning to set over the quiet farming town, casting long shadows across the dusty main street. The golden light stretched across the fields, the air still and warm. In the heart of the town, there was a small bar that served as a gathering spot for the local farmers and ranchers. Inside, a group of men sat at the bar, talking about crops, cattle, and the hard work it took to survive in a place like this. Among the regulars was Jake, the farmer's son. He had just returned from a long deployment overseas. He wasn't one for crowds, and he certainly didn't feel like celebrating. He had seen things, done things, that left scars deeper than any wound. But the quiet of the town, the rhythm of farm life, was what he needed. Just a moment of peace. Jake sat alone at a small corner table, nursing a cold beer, his eyes distant as he thought about the months he had spent serving in the Navy SEALs. The calm of the evening contrasted sharply with the chaos he had left behind in war. Yet, as much as he wanted to escape the memories, they were always there, lingering in the back of his mind. The door to the bar swung open with a loud creak, interrupting Jake's solitude. A group of bikers had just rolled into town. Their leather jackets, loud engines, and brash personalities filled the room. Their laughter boomed as they made their way to the bar, clearly full of bravado. The group was loud, careless, and drunk with their own sense of power. One of them, a tall man with a thick beard and a skull tattoo on his arm, noticed Jake sitting alone in the corner. He nudged his buddy and gestured towards the farm boy. "Look at this," he sneered. "The quiet country boy, all alone." The group of bikers laughed again, their voices growing louder as they made their way toward Jake's table. The man with the skull tattoo led the charge, a smug grin on his face as he stopped right in front of Jake. "What's this, huh? You lost, farm boy? You sure you're in the right place?" Jake didn't look up immediately. He had been through worse than taunts and mockery. But he could feel their eyes on him, the weight of their words sinking in like an anchor. Still, he said nothing. His eyes stayed focused on the table, as if he was mentally somewhere else, somewhere far away from this town and these men. "Hey, I'm talking to you," the biker continued, his voice a mix of amusement and aggression. "What? You think you're better than us? Just a little farmer boy, huh? Don't belong in a place like this?" The rest of the bikers gathered around, sneering and laughing, each taking turns mocking Jake. They hadn't noticed the subtle shift in his posture. They hadn't realized that Jake, though quiet, had been trained for this very kind of situation, where words became weapons and tension hung in the air like a storm ready to break. But Jake didn't move. He didn't need to. The calmness in his face told the bikers all they needed to know. He wasn't a man to be provoked, not easily. They could see that now, but it didn't stop them. They wanted to see him crack, to see him react, to prove their dominance over him. The tall biker with the skull tattoo smirked, looking down at Jake with a raised eyebrow. "What's the matter, little boy? Too scared to talk?" he taunted, his voice dripping with disdain. Jake took a slow breath, his fingers tightening around the bottle of beer in his hand. But he didn't stand up. He didn't yell. He didn't need to. The bikers waited for him to say something, to give them a reason to keep pushing him, to make this encounter more than just a stare down. The room was filled with laughter, but it didn't faze Jake. He had heard worse. He had seen worse. The bikers continued their taunting, each word sharper than the last. Their voices bounced off the walls, growing louder with each passing second. They were trying to get a rise out of him, trying to make him snap, but Jake wasn't about to give them the satisfaction. One of the bikers, a man with a thick mustache and a patch on his leather vest that read "Outlaw," leaned in closer. He reached out and slapped the table in front of Jake, causing the glass of beer to wobble. "I bet you never had a real drink, huh? Just sit there like a scared little farm boy." His eyes gleamed with malice, and Jake could feel the tension in the air thickening. Jake's grip on the beer bottle tightened, but he didn't respond. He didn't need to. He wasn't here to argue. His mind wasn't focused on these men, on their words. He was back in the field, on the front lines, where every movement had consequences and every decision could mean life or death. He had been trained for worse situations than this. The group of bikers pressed in closer, their jeering growing louder. "What's wrong, little boy?" The one with the skull tattoo sneered. "Afraid to stand up for yourself? Or are you too weak to do anything?" His voice carried a harsh edge, the kind of challenge that only someone with a complete lack of understanding would throw out. Jake felt the heat of their words, but he didn't react. He didn't show any sign of being affected. That's what they wanted, for him to break, to react. But Jake knew better. His training had taught him to stay in control, to never let anyone see his emotions, not when they were trying to bait him. He wasn't the one who needed to prove anything here, but the bikers were getting more aggressive. One of them, a shorter man with a bandana, leaned forward and pointed a finger at Jake's chest. "We should show you how we handle guys like you around here," he spat. The others laughed, egging him on. Jake's pulse quickened, but only just. He could feel the situation escalating, but he knew he had to stay calm. He had to defuse this before it got worse. Slowly, he set his beer down on the table, the sound of the glass hitting wood sharp in the otherwise tense silence. "Let me make one thing clear," Jake said quietly, his voice calm but firm. "I don't want any trouble, but if you keep pushing me, you'll find out just how much trouble you've invited." He didn't raise his voice, didn't make a threatening gesture. He simply stated the truth, with the authority that only someone who had been through real combat could carry. The room went silent for a moment. The bikers froze, their mocking grins faltering. Jake's eyes never wavered as he met each of their gazes, his calm demeanor enough to send a subtle warning. The bikers didn't know what they were dealing with. They thought he was just a quiet, harmless farm boy, fresh from the fields. They had no idea what kind of training he had endured, the kind that turned ordinary men into Navy SEALs, men who could kill with precision and without hesitation. The biker with the skull tattoo sneered, but said nothing. He could see something in Jake's eyes now, a steel resolve that hinted at danger. His bravado faltered slightly, but he wasn't done. He had to prove a point, to show that he could break the farm boy, make him show some sign of fear. "You think you're tough, huh?" The skull tattoo biker spat, his voice laced with contempt. "Let's see how tough you are when I shove that rifle right up your ass." At that moment, something shifted in the air. Jake's eyes narrowed just a fraction, and without warning, he stood up, the movement fluid and controlled. The table creaked as he pushed it aside, the bikers flinching at the sudden shift in his posture. Jake stepped forward, not aggressively, but with a quiet confidence that spoke volumes. The biker who had spoken lunged forward, but before he could even raise his fist, Jake had already moved. The room seemed to slow down as Jake stepped to the side, his body moving with the precision of someone who had faced down far worse than this. He grabbed the biker's wrist mid-swing, twisting it effortlessly and sending the man crashing to the ground, stunned and disoriented. The rest of the bikers stood frozen, shocked at how quickly the situation had escalated. One of them reached for his gun, but Jake was faster. He had already turned, facing the rest of them with a cold, unyielding gaze. The room was dead silent. The sound of the fallen biker hitting the ground echoed in the tense air. Jake stood tall, his posture relaxed, but unwavering. He could feel the eyes of the remaining bikers on him, their once laughing faces now frozen in uncertainty. Jake didn't even flinch. The biker who had reached for his gun hesitated, his hand still hovering over the holster. Jake's eyes locked onto him, and for a moment, everything else seemed to fade away. The calm in Jake's gaze was enough to send a shiver down the biker's spine. Without a word, the man slowly pulled his hand away from his gun, realizing that it wasn't worth it. The skull-tattooed biker, who had been the most vocal, pushed himself up from the floor, his pride wounded more than his body. He glared at Jake, breathing heavily, but there was a flicker of something else in his eyes. Respect, maybe even fear. His arrogance had melted away, and now he saw Jake for who he really was, someone not to be trifled with. "Get out," Jake said simply, his voice low but firm. "You've made your point, but I'm not the one you want to mess with." The bikers exchanged uncertain glances, but none of them moved to challenge Jake. They had come here looking for a fight, but what they didn't know was that they had just picked the wrong fight. One by one, the bikers backed away, muttering under their breath, and slowly made their way out of the bar. Jake didn't watch them leave. He turned, picked up his beer from the table, and sat back down, his body finally relaxing after the tension had broken. He didn't need to prove anything. The bikers had learned that lesson the hard way. As the door creaked shut behind them, Jake took a long drink, letting the silence wash over him once more. The fight was over, and he hadn't had to raise a hand.